What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. In February, I made a video showing a pretty unknown challenge known as the Professor Oak Run. This video was without a doubt the most well-received video I've ever made, and by popular demand, I'm going to take on the second generation. Today we're going to find out how easily you can complete Professor Oak's challenge in Pokemon Gold and Silver. So I mentioned at the end of the previous installment that if that video hit 10,000 likes, I'd take on the next generation. I chose that number because I assumed that it would never happen because I knew way ahead of time how insanely difficult this is, and to put it short, it didn't get to 10,000 likes. It got to 30,000, so I guess I shot myself in the foot on that one. But as promised, we're going to take a look at Gold and Silver and see just how hard this game can be. Just a forewarning, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you can check out my previous video in the top right of your screen. I'd highly suggest checking that out because this video will make a whole lot more sense. Just like last time, the rules are pretty straightforward. We have to complete the Pokédex as much as we can before each badge, and glitches can't be used. So let's just jump right into the game and figure out how easily we can pull this off. If you're subscribed to the Professor Oak subreddit, you already know that this is an extremely daunting task. If you watched the red and blue video and thought, wow, that looks extremely tedious to do, you're in for a treat. Compared to those games, Gold and Silver is a whole nother animal. Out of all the games available, this is probably the second to last game that I'd recommend trying, but if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description for the spreadsheet that I made. So the game starts out as it normally does with you picking your name and talking to your mother, but once again we're greeted with our professor and have to choose the Pokemon that we're going to carry through the game. Our choices are Cyndaquil, Chikorita, and Totodile. As I said last time, choosing the Pokemon that evolves the earliest is going to be the best choice. Quilava evolves into Typhlosion at level 36, Bayleaf evolves into Meganium at level 32, and Croconaw evolves to Feraligatr at level 30, so Totodile is going to be the best choice. But once again, we can't add it to the total just yet. Professor Elm asks us to meet up with Mr. Pokemon at his house, who has something important to show us. As you progress to that point, you start to realize just how many Pokemon are available this early in the game. I should have expected that considering there are 2 regions, but hey, I'm dumb enough to do this challenge, so I'm not really surprised on that one. When we meet up with Mr. Pokemon, we also meet the god of the challenge, Professor Oak. He forced us to take the Pokédex, so even if we didn't want to do this challenge, we have to now. With this, we can add Totodile to our dex total. After giving back the mystery egg to Professor Elm, we're ready to take on this beast of a challenge. Route 29 is not only the first route in the game, but it's also the first location to find a couple Pokemon we need. Here we can catch Pidgey and Sentret. For some reason, they're a higher level here than future routes, so this is currently the best place to catch them. If we head north of this route, we can access a small area of Route 46. This is a pretty easy place to miss, but there are a couple Pokemon here that we can't obtain anywhere else. Geodude, Spearow, and Jigglypuff can be caught here, which brings the dex total to 6 Pokemon. Moving ahead a little bit, we reach Route 31. I get a phone call from my mother about saving money, which oddly enough is something pretty important that I'll get to later. This route contains a majority of the Pokemon that we need to catch before Falkner, mostly because this also leads to Dark Cave. Caterpie, Metapod, and Bellsprout are here, but there are also some more Pokemon available at different times of the day. Because this was a new feature at the time, there are a ton of Pokemon that have to be caught specifically during the morning, day, or night. Because waiting for these days to pass would be extremely boring, there is a quick method to getting around this. If you're at the start menu and press down, B, and select, you get access to a secret menu that asks for a code. This code can be calculated online from your trainer ID, name, and current money, which gives you the code to change the time. Because it would be really annoying to mention for every encounter, if you see me catching a Pokemon that's only available during a specific time, it's because I adjusted it through the menu option. This allows us to catch Hoot Hoot and Spinarak. This area is also the first encounter with version exclusives. Ledyba is available here in Silver, and technically Weedle and Kakuna are exclusive, but that's just because they're not available in this game at this current point. This also means that Leadian will also not be available at any point through this game. Thankfully though, there aren't that many exclusives in these games. The next area that we have to go to is Dark Cave. The overly common Zubat and extremely rare Dunsparce are in this area, which took a stupid amount of time to find because of its 1% encounter rate. If you see my Gen 2 catch 'em all, you know that these are pretty prevalent in these games, so we'll see a lot more of that later. Just like my playthrough of Red and Blue, this is about the point where I'm running low on money. There are definitely more trainers than last time, but once again they give out extremely small amounts, which means we're barely scraping by to get them all. This game does offer a rematch feature through the Pokegear, but it's not as simple as future games. Either way, we technically have an unlimited supply of money if we have the time. Violet City is the location of our first gym leader, but there's still quite a bit more that we can do before we head there. In one of the houses near the Pokemon Center, there's a person looking to make a trade. I caught another Bellsprout while I was getting everything else, which I used to trade for an Onyx. Because we can't use another game to trade, we can't get Steelix at any point. Following the story, we can head to Sprout Tower to take on the Sage at the top of the building to obtain the HM for Flash. This is completely optional, but this area contains some more Pokemon that we have to grab. Rattata is available here, as well as Ghastly higher up in the tower. After collecting the HM from the Sage, we can move on. If we head south of Violet City, we can reach Route 32, which has some new Pokemon, but we're blocked off from this area until we defeat the gym leader, so this would seem like this is all we can catch. Although this area is guarded, we can actually head west from here and head down to the ruins of Alph, where I have to basically re-record my last upload. This area is filled with a bunch of small shrines with puzzles to solve, and at this point in the game, we only have access to one of the puzzles. If we solve the puzzle and reveal that it's Kabuto, we'll drop down through the floor and enter the tunnels of the ruins of Alph. Here we can now catch Unknown, and thankfully I don't need to catch another 25 of these this time. With this, we have reached a total of 17 Pokemon, which is the maximum amount of Pokemon you can catch in this area, but that doesn't mean that we're done with the Pokedex. Just like the last video, we have to evolve as many Pokemon as we can before we take on Falconer, and this is a lot harder than Red and Blue. So let's go over them from easiest to hardest. Now, leveling up the Pokemon at this point is kinda interesting. It's obvious that you want to level up in the place that offers the most experience, but in Gold and Silver there are two places that give out the best experience in my opinion. The Ruins of Alph is nice because no matter what form you fight, the experience payout is exactly the same. This is effective if you want to really accurately calculate how long it would take to level up a specific Pokemon, but there is another option. Sprout Tower offers Rattata, which can give out about 40 XP maximum, but if the time is shifted to night, Ghastly appears 85% of the time and gives out 40 XP minimum and as high as 81. Because it's so easy to encounter Ghastly, I chose to take care of most of my battles in this area. There are a lot of Pokemon that we have to run through, so the more XP the better in my opinion. The only downside to this option is that quite a few Pokemon here don't have a move that's effective towards Ghastly, so for those instances I just ran away and fought Rattata until I could. As expected, the Caterpie line is the easiest because of how few levels it needs to evolve. I once again made the mistake of wasting Pokeballs on getting Metapod because it doesn't know any attacking moves until it evolves into Butterfree. After switching Caterpie back and forth for a bit, we're able to evolve it into Metapod and then into Butterfree. Sentret was the second easiest to evolve, but don't get that confused with me saying that it was easy. Sentret evolves at level 15, which means it has to level up about 12 levels to evolve because it's only available in one area at this point. This one took a little over an hour to evolve into Furret, but there are much more difficult Pokemon on the horizon. The next two Pokemon are Spearow and Hoothoot, which both evolve at level 20. I would have to say that Spearow was easier because it instantly has access to Peck, where Hoothoot has to level up to 11 before that's an option. I did plan ahead however and took him through quite a few battles, which made it less of a struggle by the time we got to grinding. Spearow obviously finished a little faster, but both finished in about 2.5 hours. This gives us Fearow and Noctowl. I also want to note that Hoothoot learns Hypnosis, which can come in handy later for catching other Pokemon. Bellsprout was up next on this list, and just like Spearow, it has access to a stab move right when you get it. Vine Whip makes easy work of everything in the tower, and this one took about 3 hours total to evolve into weepinbell at level 21. We don't have access to evolution stones for quite a long time, so we'll take care of that later on. Spinarak was surprisingly easy because it somehow learns Nightshade at level 17, which is super effective against Ghastly. Getting to that point was a little rough because it only knows Poison Sting and Constrict, so it took about 3.5 hours to get it to evolve into Ariados at level 22. Rattata was one of the Pokemon that I took along most of the battles because it doesn't learn anything other than normal type moves through level up. I ended up having to level it up outside of Sprout Tower because switch training wasn't going to be the fastest option. This one took a little under 4.5 hours to evolve into Raticate at level 20. Here's a fun fact. Did you know that Rattata can learn Thunderbolt and Blizzard through TMs? I found this out while I was looking up its moveset while grinding. It's a weird thing that's in the same realm as why Sentret can learn Surf. Like, what part of this Pokemon can change the weather on command? It's a rat. Zubat has a rough start because it only knows Leech Life for a while, but once it learns Bite at level 12, the rest is a breeze. Because we're in a new generation, we also have new evolutions. If we reach max friendship with Golbat and level it up, it will evolve into Crobat. This really doesn't take as long as you'd think, because it already earned a ton of happiness through the grinding, so it only took another half an hour to get it to evolve. Although Ghastly is pretty easy, I saved it to be one of the last Pokemon to grind, just in case I found a shiny while I was grinding. And I assumed correctly. With the amount of grinding that you have to do, it's almost expected to find one at some point, and I'm very glad I found this one instead of the Weather Rat. The first few levels were actually a little difficult because I would have to heal after almost every battle because both sides are dealing super effective damage. It took about 4.5 hours for Ghastly to evolve into Haunter. Because we can't trade, Gengar is unobtainable. But then again, its shiny sucks, so I don't really care. Geodude was a pretty tough one, mostly because of the fact that it's once again one of those switch training Pokemon until it learns Rock Throw at level 11. This one took a little under 6 hours to evolve into Graveler, but that's nothing compared to the last two. So the next two are a lot higher in level, but in a weird way they're technically easier than the others. Totodile and Pidgey are both in a faster egg group than the others in this section. Each Pokemon in the game is registered in an XP group, which influences how much XP it needs before it levels up. So although both Pokemon require more XP in total, per level they technically level up faster than the others. Not that that really matters, but that'll have more of an influence later on as we progress through the other gyms. Once Totodile gained access to Water Gun at level 13, it was all uphill from there. In total, it took me about 7 hours to evolve Totodile to Croconaw, and Croconaw to Feraligatr. That may sound unrealistic because it was only 3 levels lower than Graveler, but keep in mind the difference between level 25 and level 30 is over 10,000 XP, which is about 2/3 of what Graveler earned to get to level 25. And now, Pidgey. Pidgey is once again the leader of the Why Did I Willingly Do This Challenge Club. It evolves at level 36, which means you have to earn roughly 40,000 XP to finish, and that's about double what Feraligatr had to get. Because Pidgey earns Gust a lot faster, it took about 15 hours to evolve Pidgey to Pidgeotto and Pidgeotto to Pidgeot. I really want to say this is the hardest one in the game, but there are much more difficult ones on the horizon. In total, before the first gym leader, we can get 32 Pokemon, but there is one more that we can get. One thing that a lot of people opt out of doing in these games is allowing your mom to save your money. It's a pretty useless feature because if you need the money, you have to fly to your house to retrieve it. It's meant to be used so you don't spend all your money right when you get it, but I feel like that's something that's almost impossible to do no matter what part of the game you're in. This mechanic does have its incentives though. Once your bank reaches a specific amount, your mom will automatically buy you things and put them in your PC. They aren't random and they're given to you at specific increments. Among that list is the Moonstone. In order to get one, you have to have at least $15,000 in your mom's savings for her to buy one. You can only get one of them, which isn't the issue, but getting that much money at this point in the game is probably harder than leveling up everything for this section. By the time you finish all the available battles and save as much money as you possibly can, you won't even be close to that amount. Because you can't rematch trainers at this point, you have to farm berries in order to get enough money. These take days to grow, and although you can adjust the 3DS's clock to advance stuff like this, the payout is abysmal, and as a result it can take days, if not weeks, to complete. Pretty much everyone in the subreddit has acknowledged that this is an extreme waste of time, so technically I already failed this challenge. But at that rate, this video would have come out never. So instead, let's take on Falkner and move on to the next section. So at this point you're probably thinking, wow John, you've spent like an entire week grinding for the first badge. So it must get a lot easier now, right? No. As I mentioned in the last video, because of our overleveled team, there isn't a single battle that will be even slightly difficult. Plus we have counters for most types, so even if that was an issue, we'd still be fine. After claiming the badge, Professor Elm gives us a call and says that he wants us to go to the Pokemon Center in Violet City. One of the professor's assistants gives us the mystery egg and asks us to open it up and see what's inside. Now normally I'd crack one of these bad boys over a skillet, but apparently that's not legal in this region, so we'll have to walk around a lot until it's ready to come out. This kinda sucks because we don't have access to a bicycle yet, but after some walking around, Togepi hatches from the egg. Now that we've finished this event, the man blocking our access to Route 32 allows us to pass, which opens up the area to a lot of new Pokemon. On this route we can catch Mareep, Hoppip, and Wooper for right now. This area also has another partial version exclusive, as Ekans is only available on this route in Silver. This also means that Arbok is not available, but we'll get access to them later in the game. Before we enter the Union Cave, if we stop in the Pokemon Center, we can talk to this fisherman who will give us the old rod. This requires a lot of backtracking to get new Pokemon, but we'll get to that once we're finished with the catching for this section. In Union Cave, the only new Pokemon is Sandshrew, which brings the total to 37 Pokemon. Moving forward a bit, upon reaching Azalea Town, we meet up with Kurt, who wants us to help with the Slowpoke well to defeat the reappearance of Team Rocket. Although we have to take on Team Rocket by ourselves because he broke his back, this is also the location where we can get Slowpoke, which is the only place to get one at this point in the game. After this section, we can head to the Elex Forest to grab Paris and Oddish, which are the last land Pokemon that we can catch at this point. With only 8 Pokemon caught so far, it shouldn't be much more, right? Far from that, actually. Like I mentioned earlier, the old rod is a really important item to get at this point, because there are a ton of water locations on every route that we've already visited. If we go back to Slowpoke Well, we can start off by catching Goldeen and Magikarp. Magikarp is available on every route at this point, but because the levels are going to be the same with the old rod no matter where we are, the location where you get one doesn't really matter. Going in order, the rest of them are Tentacool on Route 32, Poliwag in Violet City, and Krabby in Cherry Grove City. The last one is definitely the easiest one that you can miss. On Route 32, there's an opponent on the bridge named Fisher Ralph. If you exchange phone numbers with him, he can call you and let you know about swarm Pokemon that can appear. Because the chances of people calling you in these games is really infrequent, it seems like this would be an annoying one, but there is a way to increase your chances. If you go back to your house and speak with your mom, you can request to change the clock to daylight savings time. Because the game cards don't have the ability to do that automatically, you have the option to turn it off and then on. If you do that and wait for a minute, it can trigger calls because you essentially reset the clock events. This doesn't work all the time, but I was able to get Ralph to call me on the 3rd or 4th try. He lets me know that there's a swarm of quillfish on Route 32, and when we go there, we can fish one up with the old rod. Now that we're done with that, let's check out the evolutions that we need to get. So when it comes to XP, we don't really get a huge boost for wild battles. But then again, this is Gen 2, where the highest level battle in Johto is like level 45. Out of all the new locations, the Union Cave seemed to be the best choice. The top floor is barely better than the Sprout Tower, but the lower floor offers Pokemon about 2 levels higher, which gives us an average of about 100 XP per battle. This is about double from last time, but that's not really saying much. The easiest Pokemon in this section was Wooper. Having access to Water Gun at the get-go made easy work of almost every Pokemon in the cave. After an hour and a half, Wooper evolved into Quagsire at level 20. Oddish was also just as easy for the exact same reasons. At level 21, it evolved into Gloom. Although Poliwag evolves a lot higher than many Pokemon here, it's in a faster XP group which only took about 2 hours to evolve into Poliwhirl. The rest of the list is much worse. Sandshrew was the first of the few Pokemon that couldn't initially battle the Pokemon in the Union Cave because it lacks any moves that aren't not very effective. This took about 3.5 hours to evolve into Sandslash at level 22. Paris is in the same boat as it only has access to Scratch and Leech Life, so this was also switch trained until it could. This took about 3 hours to evolve into Parasect at level 24. Hoppip, also known as the Floating Magikarp, has only access to Splash until level 10, so this was carried quite a bit through the Slowpoke Well battles. After 3 hours it evolved into Skiploom, and then into Jumpluff. While Krabby has access to Bubble, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's still a terrible move. After a while it just knocked out everything, but around 4 hours Krabby evolved into Kingler at level 28. Magikarp was also kind of a pain because it had to be switch trained for 5 levels because it only knew Splash when I caught it. Trying to battle by itself was also not easy because it couldn't be done in Union Cave, but after 4 hours it evolved into Gyarados. Mareep was easier than I expected because I just trained it in the Slowpoke Well for a little less experience per battle. Thundershock worked great on Zubat and Slowpoke, so it took 5 hours for Mareep to evolve into Flaffy, and then Flaffy into Ampharos. Tentacool and Goldeen weren't fun Pokemon to train, mostly because their movesets are both garbage. Both took about 7 hours apiece to evolve into Tentacruel and Seaking. Togepi evolved into Togetic after training up the others, but I don't have an exact time because it spent the entire time of grinding in the party. But the worst of the group by a long shot is Slowpoke. It evolves at level 37, which means we have to gain about 50,000 XP to finish up this section. It doesn't learn a water move until level 15, so having to tackle our way to that point is just as tedious as the rest of this section. After over 9 hours it evolved into Slowbro, so thankfully we can move on to... No. Please tell me I'm imagining things. While a ton of Pokemon can learn Headbutt through the guy in the Elex Forest, Slowpoke is one of the very few that can learn it through Level Up. Since we don't have access to that guy because it's locked behind that cut tree, you'd imagine it wouldn't work, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case. It doesn't work the same way as HMs, so if you get the move, you can use it immediately. So let's go bash some trees and see what we get. If you don't know anything about these games, Headbutt trees come in 2 forms, regular and rare trees. They look exactly the same, and it's up to you to figure out which is which. Unlike the Gen 2 Catch 'em All video I did, I'm not going to blindly hit trees until I find the Pokemon that I want, so I'll use this tool online that maps up which trees contain which Pokemon. This made it possible to get Execute, Pineco, Apom, and Heracross, bringing the total to 65 Pokemon. Pineco is not a fun Pokemon to evolve, mostly because half of its moves kill itself. But at least we don't have to get any ribbons on it this time. After 6 hours, it evolved into Fortress. Would you be surprised if I said there was one more Pokemon? By this point, if you're really frugal with your money, you can get your mom to buy you a Moonstone. With this, we can evolve Jigglypuff to Wigglytuff, which gives us 67 Pokemon, and the maximum amount that we can have at one batch. Finally. Now that we've drained all our money into our savings, it's time to get more. After taking on Bugsy and everyone else in the gym, we can finally push towards Elex Forest and head to Goldenrod City. Before we go to the big city, we have to stop on Route 34 to catch quite a few Pokemon. Drowsy, Abra, and Ditto are here, and Ditto is a really important one for a lot of breeding that we have to take care of throughout the rest of the challenge. After quickly stopping to grab the bicycle in Goldenrod City, we head north to Route 35 to catch Nidoran Male, Nidoran Female, and Yanma, bringing the total to 73 Pokemon. This route is also home to the nightmare that's a national park. I've said it once, and I'll definitely say it again. The bug catching contest is without a doubt the most annoying part of the Generation 2 games, mostly because of how unlikely it is that you'll win. To make a long story short, due to bad coding, your chance of coming in first place is extremely hard unless you know the mechanics of the game. When the game determines the winner, it calculates a total of all the stats for the Pokemon you caught. Due to an oversight, if you damage the Pokemon, it will calculate its current HP in the total, rather than the total HP it can have. There's also a trainer that's coded to catch either a Scyther or a Pinsir, which are the best Pokemon to get in the contest, so 90% of the time if you play against them, you'll lose. Once again, we need to win this contest twice because the first place prize is a Sunstone. Thankfully, this area contains a massive amount of new Pokemon, so our attempts won't completely go to waste. In this area, we can catch Weedle, Kakuna, Beedrill, Venonat, Pinsir, and Scyther. This is pretty annoying because you have to reset the clock for every completed attempt, but overall this didn't take too long. During the day we can also catch Sunkern, which will evolve later on. East of this area is Route 36, which is only partially available because of a weird dancing tree that's blocking the path. This is the dead end for this section, but it doesn't mean we're done filling up the decks. On this route we can still catch Growlithe and Stantler. Vulpix is a version exclusive here, so Ninetales will also not be available in this playthrough. Heading back to Goldenrod City, we can visit the game corner to get prizes that you see at any casino. Live animals. Just like last time, there's a special prize Pokemon that we have to collect, and they definitely aren't cheap. We definitely don't have the money to just buy them outright, so I resorted to testing my luck and, well, now we're broke. The best option at this point is to buy a small amount of coins, spend them until you hit the lucky jackpot for 300 coins, save, and then reset after you spend about 50 coins worth without getting the jackpot again. For the most part, this is pure luck, but there is one slot machine that gives higher odds, which barely helps, but obviously I'm going to take the better chances. Eventually, I got enough money to buy Ekans and Dratini. Yeah, we have to evolve that. After that, if we head to the Goldenrod department store, we can trade a Drowsy for a Machop. This is the only location we can get one for now, so this is an easy one to skip. The last Pokemon that we need to get before training is at the daycare. If we breed Ditto and Wigglytuff and collect the egg, it will eventually hatch and become an Igglybuff. We'll have to do this quite a lot more, but for now we're all set to begin the grind. Starting out with the easiest ones, we can use 2 Sunstones that we won to evolve Gloom to Blossom, and Sunkern to Sunflora. Aside from that, the easiest ones were definitely Nidoran Male and Female. Route 35 is the best route to train because Drowsy yields at most 200 XP, so after an hour I was able to get both Nidorina and Nidorino. Although Abra only knows Teleport until it evolves, it was pretty easy to evolve because I carried it through every battle that I could. This one also took about half an hour to evolve into Kadabra. Ekans was next, and although it doesn't get access to Bite from the start, it was pretty easy for the most part. It took about 2 hours to evolve into Arbok, bringing the total to 92 Pokemon. Our trade Machop was also pretty easy because it can know Karate Chop depending on the level that you trade your Drowsy at. At first I had to avoid Drowsy because of the weaknesses, but when it got to the later levels, it wasn't that bad. After 2.5 hours, Machop evolved into Machoke. Because we can't trade, we can't get Machamp. Drowsy was a little bit of a pain because it only knew Pound at first, but once it learned Stab Confusion, it was a lot easier to win battles. It only took 3 hours to evolve Drowsy to Hypno. Venonat was in the same position because it only knew Tackle, but since it was a higher level than Hypno, it took about 4 hours to evolve into Venomoth. Alright, seems like this section wasn't really that bad, huh? You must have forgot about Dratini. If you ever whined about any Pokemon grinding before this point, you should probably give up now. Remember how unreal it was that Pidgeot had 40,000 XP to level up? Yeah? Well, how about a billion XP? This is the ultimate challenge. The impossible grind. What was that? It's not a billion? It's only 200,000? Yeah, well, that's still a lot. While Dratini may be cute, he sucks. A lot. The one you can get from the game corner is only level 10, which means that it only has access to Wrap, which is not as good as it was in Gen 1. Once you get Dragon Rage at level 22, it's a whole lot easier, but it only has 10 PP, so you'll be going to the PC a lot to heal. So if you're to take a guess as to how long this took, what would you say? 10 hours? 20 hours? How about 31? Yeah. There was definitely some idle time thrown in there, but for the most part, that time was spent grinding. As far as I can tell, this is the hardest Pokemon to evolve in probably any of the games that have this challenge. The pseudos are always a pain, but since your wild battles aren't even level 15, it takes an insane amount of time to do. But after 31 hours, Dratini evolved into Dragonair, and then into Dragonite. This leaves us with 97 Pokemon, and the maximum amount that you can have at this point. After beating Whitney so bad it made sense that she cried this time, we can head to the flower shop and grab the squirt bottle. When we water the tree, we realize that it's actually a Sudowoodo, and that it was definitely thin enough to walk around to get to the next area. If we talk to the guy east of that event, he'll give us a HM for Rock Smash, which we'll put to good use later on. Ecruteak City is really interesting because no matter what direction you go from here, there are plenty of Pokemon to catch. If you go into the Pokemon Center, we can meet up with Bill and he'll thank us for using the PC system he created. If we head back to Goldenrod City and go by his house, he'll give us an Eevee as thanks. Right after this, I brought it to the daycare to grab another Eevee for later. To start with this section, we're going to go west of Ecruteak to Route 38. Here we can get Magnemite, Farfetch, Miltank, Tauros, and Snubbull. This is also the location where you can find the silver exclusive Meowth, which means that Persian is also not going to be available. Olivine City is the next stop where we can do quite a few things. We can meet our rival for another edgy quote, but we can also talk to this fisherman to receive the good rod. Next to the Pokemon Center, we can also get the HM for Strength, as well as begin the event with the Ampharos at the top of the lighthouse. With our new good rod, we can actually take care of all of our new fishing encounters in just this area. In the main area, we can fish for Corsola and Staryu, but in the harbor, we can get Chinchou and Shelder. Olivine City also has another trade that we can do. Krabby can be traded for Voltorb, which is helpful because we can't get those until we have access to Surf. The last thing we can do here is go west to Route 40. Because we don't have Surf, this is a dead end for now, but if we break the rocks, we have a 10% chance of encountering Shuckle. Until I made this video, I had no idea it was available outside of the gift one that you get, but with that, we're now at 110 Pokemon. Heading back to Ecruteak City, if we go to the Burn Tower, we can take on our rival and catch some new Pokemon. All we have to do is drop down this hole here and... oh no. Yep, the roaming beasts are available this early in the game, which means that we have to get all 3 of them to advance. I think you know the catchphrase by now. In the basement of this area, we can also catch Coughing and Magmar. Heading east of Ecruteak, we can go a lot farther than you'd think. A lot of Mount Mortar is blocked off because of Surf and Waterfall, but you can still walk all the way to the other side of the water at the far exit. Before we leave the mountain, we have to catch Meryl, before going outside to catch Mankey. Mahogany Town doesn't have anything going on right now, but if we head towards the Lake of Rage, we can catch Girafarig before being blocked off by Surf for the next event. After this, I went back to the daycare to breed Magmar to obtain Magby. And now the beasts. Raikou, Entei, and Suicune will roam around the map, and if you're lucky enough, you'll both end up on the same route. The catch though is that if you find one, it'll most likely run away before you can hurt it enough. Hunting them takes an insane amount of luck, and you'll definitely waste a lot of time in the process. Thankfully, the creator of this challenge also created a guide to finding them faster. Through trial and error, he was able to roughly find out their patterns, and with this map, you can calculate exactly where they should appear. This doesn't work 100% of the time, but you have a pretty good chance of it working in your favor. But catching them is an entirely different issue. A lot of mechanics are broken in these games, especially related to hunting the legendary beasts. Like I said, if you encounter them and try to attack, they'll most likely run away, so you have to spend another 10 minutes hunting them down. But I know what you're thinking. Use Haunter, he has access to Mean Look. Well, the issue here is that if we use Mean Look and we're slower than them, they run away before we can attack. So the obvious fix for that would be to grind up Haunter until he's the right level to outspeed. The next issue is that all of them have the move Roar. You think it wouldn't affect ghost types because it's a normal type move, but unfortunately it does land, and they use it on the first turn almost every time that I tried. So what's the best option? Well, there really isn't one. If you use a Pokeball, you have a 0.78% chance of catching it without damaging it. Every status move except Sleep and Freeze don't increase catch rate, so realistically our only option is to put them to sleep. So if you're dumb enough to try this, you have to 1. Encounter one, 2. Make sure your Haunter can outspeed. 3. Land Hypnosis, which has 55% accuracy. And 4. Throw Pokeballs while it's sleeping and hope that 5% catch rate comes through. Considering that you have as many as 5 chances in one encounter, it's really more difficult just to find them, but trying to figure out how to make this work without any help was unbelievably difficult. Between evolving Haunter, figuring out the best method, and catching them, it took about 10 hours to do, which doesn't sound that bad in comparison, but watching a Suicune break out of a triple jiggle and run is a feeling of failure that I don't think I've ever felt before. But after all the struggle, we can add Raikou, Entei, and Suicune to the dex total. Now let's look at the evolutions for this section. Route 38 is without a doubt the best route to train. Every Pokemon except Rattata gives out over 200 XP, and Miltank and Tauros double that. We also have access to the Kimono Girls, which can give out some nice experience. Pretty much every Pokemon was easy in comparison to what we've dealt with in the previous sections. Meryl was by far the easiest and probably the easiest in the game. You can catch it at level 15 and evolves at level 18, so it took like 20 minutes for it to evolve into Azumarill. Snubbull and Chinchou were also really easy to take care of. Snubbull doesn't have a lot of great moves, but it also doesn't need a lot of XP to evolve. Chinchou has access to water and electric moves, which are both stab. Both of these took about an hour apiece, which got Snubbull to Granbull, and Chinchou to Lantern. Mankey gets Karate Chop from the start, which is great because almost every Pokemon on Route 38 are a normal or a steel type. In about an hour and a half, Mankey evolved into Primeape. Magnemite and Voltorb were just as easy. Voltorb doesn't learn any electric moves through level up, but it does have Sonic Boom and Rollout right before it evolves. Magnemite's Stab Thundershock is really all that it has, but it still got the job done. After an hour and a half for both, Magnemite evolved into Magneton, and Voltorb evolved into Electrode. Coughing was the worst, but that's only because it evolves at level 35. Once it can access Stab Sludge, it takes care of pretty much any wild Pokemon that we find. It took about 3 hours to evolve Coughing into Wheezing. The last two Pokemon for this section are the evolutions. It's pretty obvious that this section is insanely short when you look at the big picture, so both of the Eevee were not even close to the friendship level for evolution. The best way to raise happiness at this point is just to walk around and level them up. Each one of these took about 4 hours to do, which is a long time when you have no idea if you're close or not. This evolves Eevee to Umbreon, and Eevee to Espeon. This brings the total to 128 Pokemon, which is the maximum amount for 3 badges. After sweeping Morty, we can access a few more spots on the map. If you go back to the Union Cave, we can access quite a few new Pokemon. In the basement area, we can surf across the water and access not only another floor, but a couple more exits. If we take the exit, we end up in the secret area of the Ruins of Alph. Thankfully, we don't have to do any more puzzles, but we can get Natu, as well as Smeargle. Heading back into the cave, if we go to the lowest floor and surf to the end, there will be a large body of water. If it's Friday, there will be a static Lapras that you can encounter. This is another one of those things you can just reset the clock for. Our next stop is going to be Route 35. Here we can surf on the water for Psyduck and Golduck, which is nice because that saves a lot of level up time. At this point, we only have one more Pokemon to catch, which is Mantine on Route 41. In this section, Gold is the only one with an exclusive Pokemon, which means that the total amount for this section will be 1 less if you're playing Silver. The only Pokemon that we have to level up at this point is Natu. You can catch it at level 24, and it evolves at level 25, so it took like maybe 10 minutes to evolve into Xatu. The last thing we can do for this section is head all the way to New Barktown. If we surf east of here, we can take our first step into Kanto. We're blocked off from going there because we don't have access to Waterfall, but if we go to this small section in the Tojo Falls, we can grab another Moonstone. It doesn't really matter what you use this on, so I evolved Nidorino into Nidoking. This gives us a total of 36 Pokemon in Gold, and 35 if I was playing in Silver. At this point in the challenge, the gym leaders can be defeated in any order that you want, but since we're trying to get the most Pokemon with the least badges, we're going to work our way to Price's gym in Mahogany Town. Heading to the Lake of Rage, I can knock out a free shiny, as well as help Lance take on the Rocket Hideout. With that out of the way, we can take on Price and use our new HM for Whirlpool that Lance just gave us. This opens up the Whirl Islands, where we can get all the Pokemon for this section. Seal is available on every floor, but if we go into the cave where Lugia is supposed to be, we can catch Horsey and Seadra. This means that the only Pokemon that we have to evolve is Seal. It doesn't gain any stab moves through leveling, but we can teach it the surf move that I got from the Ecruteak Dance Theater, which made the process a lot easier. After about 2 hours, Seal evolved into Dugong. This finishes off the section with 140 Pokemon for Gold and 139 for Silver. During this section we can take on Chuck or Jasmine because they make zero impact on what we can or can't catch at this point in time. I chose to battle Chuck so I could finally have access to fly, as well as grab the secret potion to finish up the lighthouse event. After that we can take on Jasmine and open up the east exit of Mahogany Town. Route 44 contains a couple more Pokemon that we can add to the total. Here we can catch Tangela and Lickitung before we enter the ice path to catch some more Pokemon for the dex. This area contains Swinub and Jinx, but it also has Delibird as a silver exclusive. This brings the total to 144 Pokemon. Before we leave the area, it's important to not forget about the HM for Waterfall, as we'll definitely need that later on. When we exit the area, we reach Blackthorn City, but there isn't much that we can do right now, so we'll come back when we're ready to take on Claire. South of the city is Route 45, where a majority of our remaining Pokemon are located. In gold we can catch Gligar and Teddiursa, and in silver you can get Skarmory, Phanpy, and Donphan. Silver has the advantage that Phanpy's evolution is here, which means that we have to spend more time leveling up Teddiursa. Route 45 also has access to the north side of Dark Cave, which is the only place where you can catch Wobbuffet. Before we level up our Pokemon and take on the story, there's actually one more thing that we can do. Once you collect 7 gym badges, Professor Elm will call you and let you know that something's going down in Goldenrod City. If you go to the radio tower, you'll find out the Team Rocket has taken over again, and it's your job to clear them out. After fighting the fake director at the top, he'll give you the basement key to find him in the Goldenrod Underground. After we rescue him and clear out Team Rocket, the director will give us the Rainbow Wing in gold and the Silver Wing in silver. And yes, that means we can also catch Ho-Oh in this section. Unfortunately, this is just as hard as catching any other legendary, as we don't have access to the Master Ball until we defeat all 8 Johto gyms. Although its catch rate is god-awful, we do have a bunch of Pokemon that can put it to sleep, which makes this much easier. After about 30 minutes of throwing balls, we've got Ho-Oh. The last Pokemon that we need to grab is actually an in-game trade. If you go to Blackthorn City, there's a trainer that's looking to trade a Rhydon. In order to get it, we have to trade her not just a Dragonair, but a female one. You're probably thinking, well great, now you have to gamble all that money just to grind again because you can't access the Dragon's Den yet. Actually no, aside from the Dragon's Den, there is one more place that we can get them, Route 45. If we fish on the water, we have a 10% chance of finding Dratini at level 10. It may be the same level as the one we trained earlier, but at least we don't have to waste the money that we're definitely going to need later. After we get another Dragonair, we can trade to get Rhydon. This also means that Rhyhorn is available too. While we can't catch one, we can surely breed one. While we're in this area anyways, we also can breed Jinx to get another baby Pokemon. This gives us Rhyhorn and Smoochum. Now it's time to do some grinding. Swinub and Teddiursa are both very easy to do, mostly because I took them through Team Rocket's storyline to take advantage of the free experience. Both of them were close to evolving, but I spent an additional hour to get both of them to evolve after that. This gives us Piloswine and Ursaring, bringing the total to max out at 153 Pokemon. After defeating Claire and proving our worth in the Dragon's Den, we're given the 8th gym badge, which is the final thing that we need to open up the entire map. Well, kinda. The first thing on our list is to go back to Mount Mortar. Now that we can use Waterfall, we can traverse through the rest of the mountain and battle the Karate King at the deepest part of the cave. After we defeat him, he'll gift us a Tyrogue. This means we have to take care of all of its evolutions, and this is probably the most annoying thing that we have to deal with in this section. For those who don't know, Tyrogue's evolution depends entirely on its attack and defense stats. Now there isn't exactly a perfect way to guarantee which one you'll get, but my best method is to get each of them was to level up Tyrogue right before it hit level 20 and save the game. I leveled it up to see what it evolved into, and if it wasn't what I wanted, I gave it stat boosting items to get the correct numbers that I wanted. With our higher attack we get Hitmonlee, higher defense is Hitmonchan, and equal attack and defense is Hitmontop. With that out of the way, we can now head towards the Elite Four. After crossing over the waterfall in the Tojo Falls, we reach Route 26 and 27. Both of these have roughly the same Pokemon, so it doesn't really matter where you catch these next Pokemon. Here we can catch Doduo, Dodrio, and Ponyta. This is all that we can get for this section, which means that Ponyta is the only Pokemon that we need to evolve at this point. This was really easy because there's a decent amount of trainers that we can fight before the Indigo Plateau. After clearing through the routes and we fight our rival at Victory Road, we're pretty close to evolving. After about 30 minutes, Ponyta evolved into Rapidash. This gives us 61, which is technically the most you can get at 8 badges, but I'll get back to that in a sec. The Elite Four went in the same fashion as Red and Blue did. Because I didn't dedicate time to evolving a specific Pokemon, my levels were pretty much everywhere. But I brought along a team full of legendaries, so that didn't really matter at all. After defeating the Elite Four, we've completed the Johto side of the challenge, but we're definitely not done with the challenge. We still have to take on Kanto. So when I said that I collected all the Pokemon for 8 badges, that wasn't exactly the truth. There are a ton of Pokemon that we can get now that we have access to Kanto, and the best part is that almost none of them are hidden behind a gym badge. So, let's get started. Upon reaching Vermilion City, we can head north because of the Snorlax that's blocking the path. If we head all the way up to Cerulean City, we can head east to the power plant. There aren't any Pokemon inside anymore, but there is a side quest that we have to complete to open up all of Kanto. If we talk to the head of the power plant, he'll say that his machine part was stolen. If we go to the Cerulean City gym, we can meet up with the rocket grunt that stole it and retrieve the part. After returning it, if we head to Lavender Town, we can receive the expansion card, which gives us the Pokeflute radio channel. After that, we can head back to Vermilion City and use it to wake up Snorlax and add it to the dex total. At this point, I didn't really have a structure as to where I'd go from here, so I just followed the guide that I made for myself. If you go through Diglett's Cave, we can catch Diglett and Dugtrio, and then grab Pikachu on Route 2. The next stop is going to be Pewter City. If we talk to this random guy, he'll give us the second wing that's in the opposite version of these games. Why do you have this? If we go east of here, we can reach Mount Moon, which is the place where we can fight our rival again, but also catch Clefairy. If we take the ladder, we can also access a small area that has a field and a small shop. If it's nighttime on Monday, there will be a few Clefairy dancing around the pond. When they notice you, they'll drop a rock that you can smash. This will give us another Moonstone, and this can be repeated every Monday. That's pretty much all we have to do in this corner of the map, so let's head over to Cerulean City and add some more to our total. If we head back to Route 10, we can catch Electabuzz before heading into the Rock Tunnel. In here, we can catch Cubone, Marowak, and Kangaskhan, which is really nice because all the old Safari Pokemon are extremely easy to catch now. After reaching Lavender Town, we can work our way down to Fuchsia City and catch Chansey, as well as obtain the Super Rod from the fishing house. We actually need 2 of these because of a trade, which is a little bit of a pain because they have a 1% chance of spawning. If we talk to this person on Route 14, we can trade one of them for an Aerodactyl. For some reason, this is the only fossil Pokemon that you can get in these games, so the Ammonite and Kabuto lines aren't available in this challenge. To finish up our catches for the Kanto side, we stop at Route 7 for Murkrow and Houndour, Route 16 for Grimer and Muck, Route 17 for Slugma, and Route 22 for Mr. Mime, bringing the total to 178 Pokemon. Before we leave to go back to Johto, there are still quite a few more things that we can do. If we head north of Cerulean City, we can go to Bill's old cottage and speak with his grandfather. If we show him specific Pokemon that he requests, he'll give us the evolution stones. Unfortunately, due to some really poor gameplay decisions, he'll only give you one of the Leaf Stone, Thunderstone, Firestone, and Waterstone. These are the only ways you can get them in these games, which means there are quite a large amount of Pokemon that we now can't get. It doesn't matter who you pick to evolve, so I'll cover who I chose in a bit. There is one more thing that we can do in Johto, but it's best to wait until we're completely done grinding. After completing the Clefairy Doll event in Saffron City, we can use the rail pass to ride back to Kanto. Because we arrive in Goldenrod City, I went south to breed the rest of the baby Pokemon that we need. With this, we can add Pichu, Cleffa, and Elekid. I also bred another Eevee for a future stone evolution. The only Pokemon that we need to get with the Super Rod is Remoraid, which you can find very easily on Route 44. The last thing that we can do is take on Lugia in the Whirl Islands. Thankfully, this is insanely easy because we obtained the Master Ball from Professor Elm, so with Lugia, we now have 183 Pokemon. Now we can head back to Kanto and finish up the rest of the Pokemon for this section. To start off, we used a bunch of stones to evolve all the Pokemon we can. With the last 2 Moonstones that I needed, I evolved Nidorina to Nidoqueen, and Clefairy to Clefable. As for the ones we only had 1 of, I used the Thunderstone to evolve Pikachu to Raichu, the Leaf Stone to evolve Gloom to Vileplume, the Firestone to evolve Eevee to Flareon, and the Waterstone to evolve Poliwhirl to Poliwrath. Now it's time to level up our catches. Thankfully, we have a very small list, and they were all easy to do because of how many trainers we could battle in Kanto. I took the time to battle just about everyone I possibly could, so in total for all these it took about 3 hours. This made it possible to get Slugma to Macargo, Remoraid to Octillery, and Houndour to Houndoom. The last one that has to evolve is Chansey, which was a little bit of a pain as I realized I forgot to catch one in a friend ball. So I caught another one, and after about 2 hours, Chansey evolved into Blissey. The last thing that we can do for this section is head to the Celadon City Game Corner. I saved this for last because once again we need to buy another Pokemon. If you've been somehow keeping track of the decks, you know the one that I'm missing. Porygon is only available through the Game Corner, and as usual, it's stupidly expensive. In order to get one, you need 9,999 coins. This is the same amount regardless if you choose gold or silver, but in Crystal it's only 5,555 coins. Since we battle pretty much every trainer in the Kanto region, we can just buy one outright. In order to get this, you need just under $200,000 to buy one. It's totally not worth the price, but you should definitely have enough money by now, or at least enough items to sell. This brings us to a total of 194 Pokemon, which is the real maximum amount that you can have with 8 badges. So now that we've caught every Pokemon that's available, we should be done, right? Well, there are actually a few more Pokemon that we can collect. As I said earlier, almost every Pokemon in the Kanto region doesn't require you to beat any gym leaders, but the last ones we need are located in Mount Silver, which if we want to get access there, we have to collect all 16 gym badges. So with my super team of legendaries, we're able to destroy Brock, Misty, Lieutenant Surge, Erica, Sabrina, Janine, Blaine, and Blue without a single problem. If we head to the reception gate, we can now access Route 28, but more importantly, Mount Silver. This location has a bunch of different areas with different Pokemon, so outside we can catch Sneasel, inside we can catch Misdreavus, and in the deepest section we can catch Larvitar. Those are the last Pokemon that we need to catch, which means that Larvitar is the only Pokemon we have to evolve. In terms of XP, this is almost exactly the same amount as Dragonite, as we need to get about 200,000 experience to evolve. But since we have access to much higher levels, this isn't even half as hard as it was before. Mount Silver's deepest section seems like it would be the best option for training, but personally I think the outside is easier, especially since you're literally next to a Pokemon Center. The XP yield on average is higher here anyways because of Wild Rapidash, so realistically this is the better option anyways. After grinding for about 5 hours, Larvitar evolved into Pupitar, and then into Tyranitar. This is the maximum amount of Pokemon that you can catch on one copy of Gold or Silver, but we still have one more thing that we can do. If we head back into the deepest section of Mount Silver, we can take on Red. Believe it or not, this was actually a tough challenge. His whole team is over level 70, and the only Pokemon that we have that's even close to that is Lugia. Even though it was technically way under-leveled, Tyranitar put in the most work against his team with moves like Rock Slide and Dynamic Punch. The only Pokemon that could actually live quite a few hits was Lugia. It's super bulky and has decent coverage for his team, but I had to revive it quite a few times as backup if the rest fainted. After a 12-minute battle to end all battles, we defeated Red, and with that, we successfully completed the Professor Oak Challenge in Pokemon Gold and Silver. But how did I do? So let's review. After defeating Red, we finished with a time of 253 hours and 48 minutes, which is about 4 times as long as it took to defeat Red and Blue. Like I said, the highest amount of Pokemon you can get without trading is 199, which excludes the Kanto starters, the legendary birds, the fossils except Aerodactyl, Mewtwo, the mythicals, the other stone evolutions we couldn't get, all the trade evolutions, the opposite game's version exclusives, and the other Johto starters. This comes out to just barely under 80% of the decks, which to me sounds a lot worse than it actually is. A lot of these exclusions were probably because the games were put on the same carts as Red and Blue, and they had to cut content like the Cerulean Cave, Viridian Forest, and the Safari Zone. This is without a doubt the longest amount of time I've put in a video to date, between playing the game, to making the guide, to editing, so I'm thankful I'm done even though I had a ton of fun doing it. I feel like I was pretty on point this entire challenge, but I'm sure you could finish this around 200 hours if you never messed up, but I'm not willing to do this ever again. I want to thank you all for getting the last video to over 30,000 likes, which is something I thought I would never see on any of my videos. I don't have a like goal for doing Generation 3, but I'd really appreciate it if you did like it, just so I know if you all really want me to continue this as a series. Personally, I would not recommend this to anyone, but if you're interested in the challenge, I put a guide for these games in the description below. Once again, subscribe to the Professor Oak subreddit to check out guides for basically every game that's out there. If we could get that sub to 2,000 members, that'd really mean a lot to me. And that's gonna do it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and consider subscribing, as I'll be making more videos soon. If you have any suggestions for challenges that you'd like me to do, leave a comment below. Follow me on Twitter to keep updated with new videos as they come out. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.